Sukuna, the strongest of the Heian era and one of the most sadistic villains that Jujutsu Kaisen has, having no interest in anyone else other than killing them and torturing them for his own pleasure, Megumi being the only exception. Sukuna's strength has been hyped up for the entire series at this point. It's literally been 5 years, with him getting stronger every time Yuji eats one of his fingers, and running over anyone that he's put up against. At his full power, anyone that's ever seen him thinks he would be a serious problem for Gojo, and no one refutes this, not even Gojo himself. People are very tied to Gojo and Sukuna as these gods of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, with Sukuna's own peers even talking about him like he's some fallen deity as well. They actually do this. Someone called the Angel and Sukuna himself both reference him as the Fallen, with the author saying that Sukuna probably didn't even consider himself to be human when he was alive. Seeing as I already have a video on Gojo, which you should go check out by the way, it's fitting to talk about the legend of a full-strength Sukuna, and what that would actually mean for the series. That being said, what is Sukuna's full strength? Before he even starts doing much in the series, Sukuna is already a legend in Jujutsu Kaisen that's been feared for the last 1,000 years, being hailed as the king of curses, the king of poisons, and one of the strongest people of all time. After Yuji eats one of Sukuna's fingers, he becomes a vessel for Sukuna, and Sukuna lives inside him. Immediately after this, Sukuna takes over Yuji's body and one-shots a grade 2 cursed spirit so fast that Megumi and the spirit itself can't even tell what's happening. Yuji figures out that he can suppress Sukuna in his own body, and Megumi wants to exorcise him. Gojo shows up and confirms for himself that Sukuna and Yuji did merge, and wants to fight Sukuna himself. A 10-second match where he won't go hard enough to kill him, but just enough to gauge his real strength. Sukuna and Gojo fight, and Sukuna can't hit Gojo a single time. What do you expect? Sukuna is only at 5% of his full strength. This 5% metric coming from Sukuna having 20 fingers spread across Japan. Eating all of them will restore him to his full power, 1 out of 20 being 5%. Even at this 5%, the fact that Yuji was able to be a vessel for Sukuna at all called for his immediate execution from the Jujutsu higher-ups. As a finger bearer, which curses who eat Sukuna's fingers turn into, is something that they can deal with. A full power Sukuna from Legend isn't. Yuji and the others get sent on a mission to take out a finger bearer at a detention center. This finger bearer is so strong that Yuji can't deal with it other than freaking out and surviving as long as possible until he eventually would have died. Megumi running away from it as it was completely out of the range of what he thought he could deal with, both of them having no chance of winning in their own minds. Yuji gets a signal that Megumi and Nobara are safe and summons Sukuna, changing the fight completely. Sukuna, who is now at 10% of his strength after he was fed another finger by Gojo, is so strong that the finger bearer that was about to kill Yuji is an insect by comparison, even in Sukuna's own words, mocking it for being proud of healing itself and saying that the difference between them is so vast that they shouldn't even be in the same conversation. The cursed spirit is completely aware of this and is terrified of Sukuna from the moment that he appears, and is toyed with by Sukuna until he dies, Sukuna gaining yet another finger. Sukuna hunts down Megumi and challenges him to a fight, ripping Yuji's heart out and raising the stakes of their one-on-one, eating another finger and taking him to 15% of his full strength. Sukuna can literally dance around Megumi with his hands in his pockets, while Megumi attacks him with everything that he has, constantly goading him on about using his full strength and weakening Megumi mentally. Megumi uses his Shikigami to attack Sukuna, and the difference between them is so great that Sukuna kills one of them by flexing his muscles. Sukuna hits him 3 times, and Megumi thinks he needs to end himself by summoning Maharaga. Maharaga is the only thing that excites Sukuna about Megumi in the entire fight, other than his potential when he pushes his curse technique to his limits. Sukuna and Megumi never reaching that point when Megumi cancels the summoning and Sukuna lets Yuji die for his own reasons. Gojo gets tracked down by Jogo and a fight between them begins. After a face-off, Gojo checks Jogo's cursed energy and has a flashback where he says that Jogo is even stronger than the Sukuna that he fought earlier. Some people think that Gojo was talking about a 3-finger Sukuna here, but his flashback is clearly about the 1-finger Sukuna that he fought personally. Gojo, having not seen 3-finger Sukuna in action at this point, wouldn't make this comparison. Jogo is still someone that Gojo can beat without him even trying to kill him, since the whole point of Gojo fighting him was to interrogate him anyway. The only times that Jogo is even able to touch Gojo is when he allowed him to do it. with Jogo not even damaging Gojo a single time, and having PTSD later on about fighting him. Yuji fights Mahito with Nanami, with both of them pushing Mahito to his limits. Before Nanami even gets there, Yuji gets hit by Idol Transfiguration, and Sukuna talks to Mahito like he's a peasant and sends him on his way, stunning him so long that Yuji headbutts him until he snaps back into reality. Sukuna then runs into Mahito again after Mahito uses his domain expansion and hits Mahito so hard with a casual flick of his finger with his curse technique that Mahito almost dies. Mahito runs away into a sewer and says that Sukuna's soul is on another level, even with him having less curse energy than Jogo at 15% of his strength. Mahito then says that at his full strength, no one will be able to contest Sukuna, and his revival alone will be enough to wipe out everyone in Japan, whether Mahito and the disaster curses are with him or not. Sukuna then gets referenced yet again when Toji kills Dagen and fights Megumi. Toji taking Megumi outside so fast that he didn't even know what happened to him. Speed that he says is even greater than the three-finger Sukuna that he fought earlier. Toji is so fast that Megumi can't dodge him even with his training that he's been doing since that day, and has to predict his movements in advance, otherwise he'll die. Then after fighting Toji for even longer, says that he's a rival to Sukuna in speed, retracting that greater than Sukuna statement that he made earlier. Many people have debated about this because Sukuna being as fast as Toji at 15% of his strength is a hard pill to swallow, especially for die-hard fans of the series and those who think that Toji is written to be one of the strongest characters ever made. Although when looking at what Sukuna's full strength should be, it will make a lot more sense later, especially when considering how strong Sukuna is in Legend as well. Toji is someone whose strength was said to shatter destiny by Tengen, and was one of the strongest characters alive during his time. He was so strong that he took down an exhausted Gojo without a single scratch, and bragging about killing Gojo was more important to him than Suguru trying to murder him right in front of his face, taking out two of the strongest sorcerers of their generation and making it look like nothing. Toji has also been the only person in history so far that's dodged Gojo's curse technique, Blue, losing to Gojo after Gojo came back stronger with reverse curse technique and new abilities, being taken out by Hollow Purple. Toji then comes back as an undead zombie through the Seance technique and is so strong that Maki can't believe this kind of power even exists, at least for someone without cursed energy, walking through Dagen and killing him without taking a single hit when Dagen was about to kill Maki, Nanami, Naobito, and Megumi at the same time. Being referenced later as someone who could have wiped out the entire Zenin clan by himself, including Naobito in his prime, and in the mind of Naoya Zenin, who's a combat genius, being the ultimate picture of strength. Naobito and Naoya already being so fast that hardly anyone can see them move, only being surpassed by Gojo, with Vengeful Spirit Naoya being something that Toji could have handled quickly as well. Yet Sukuna is still at this level this early in the series. Yuji is then force-fed enough fingers to bring Sukuna to 15 fingers total. 15 fingers out of 20 being 75% of Sukuna's full strength. Sukuna is now so strong and so fast that he can cut Jogo's hands off with his curse technique before Jogo even realizes that anything happened to him. His aura alone when he's standing completely still, triggering Jogo's PTSD, comparing him to Gojo. Jogo now fearing for his life as Sukuna cuts him a second time. Jogo then reveals that his only objective was to revive Sukuna, with Sukuna calling him desperate, challenging Jogo to a fight where the only thing he has to do to win is hit him a single time. The next scenes of the fight are gruesome as Sukuna dominates Jogo in every way humanly possible, slamming him around and ripping off his body parts like he did to the finger bearer earlier in the series. The 8 to 9 finger comparison that Kenjaku made that was blatantly said to be an overestimation that Jogo believed at least to some extent is now shown to not even be remotely close to the real difference in their strength. Sukuna then sees Jogo's maximum technique, Meteor, and turns it into a game of dodging it at the last second, even holding hostages to make it more interesting. Jogo says that an attack on that scale had to have at least damaged him on some level, with Sukuna popping up on top of the meteor, completely unscathed, saying, "if it hit." Some have taken this as a non-literal statement of Sukuna mocking Jogo, although with it being his max technique, being charitable, saying that it's a literal statement can work as well. Sukuna then taps into an unknown method of using a flame-based curse technique and burns Jogo to death with his own specialty, saying that Jogo was strong compared to those that he fought in the last 1,000 years, and that the path to real strength is to burn down everything without a care for anything around you. a sentiment that gets repeated in the culling games when Sukuna is referenced by Ryu as having overwhelming aggression like a calamity. An extra side point in this fight is that Jogo was called out by Sukuna for not using his domain expansion, which would be even stronger than his maximum technique was, and Jogo's reason was that Sukuna would overwrite his domain anyways, because he's that much stronger than him, something that Sukuna calls a weak reason spoken like a true loser, with Jogo still clearly being afraid of pushing his limits after his fight with Gojo. Jogo is someone that's been built up as one of the strongest curses in the series before he even had his first fight, with the many comparisons that he had to a three-finger Sukuna, placing him very high in the show's ranks. Even in Shibuya, Naoto, who is so fast that Maki and Nanami can't even see him move, gets put in the same weight class as Jogo by Daten, and then one-shots Naoto after he was injured by Dagen's domain expansion, taking down Nanami and Maki very casually as well, leaving them alive as his main priority was rushing towards Sukuna when he sensed someone else feeding Yuji his fingers. Jogo being anywhere in the same category as Naoto makes him so fast that he would blitz and one-shot many people in the series, the only ones that can deal with him one-on-one at this point in the story so far being special grade level fighters like Yuta, Yuki, or Gojo. Even Mahito, with his latent potential that would outscale Jogo at his peak, doesn't even think he's remotely strong enough to deal with Sukuna in Shibuya, as he avoids coming into contact with him as much as possible for the entire fight. Then once he does make contact with him and talks about threatening his life, Sukuna just looks at him and smiles like an adult watching a child. Sukuna's next fight is against Mahoraga. Mahoraga is the ultimate Shikigami of the 10 Shadows, at least so far, and hasn't been tamed a single time in 1,000 years. Even with a former user of the 10 Shadows being so strong that he can have a fight where both himself and his opponent dies, with that opponent having the exact same powers as Gojo, which Megami suspects is because of Mahoraga himself. Mahoraga is so strong that hardly anyone in the series can kill him, having a wheel on its back that lets him regenerate from any attack that he adapts to, adapting after being hit one time, and one-shotting cursed spirits with the Blade of Extermination, which uses positive energy just like Yuta did to one-shot Kurorushi. Sukuna goes into the fight with none of this knowledge and figures out how Mahoraga works entirely on his own, after only fighting him for a few seconds to a few minutes at best. Mahoraga even being so strong that he can hit and damage Sukuna, which Jogo couldn't, putting this fight on a completely different level. Sukuna eventually using his domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine, to rip Mahoraga apart, and then nuke it with a flame technique to vaporize everything in the area, leaving no trace of Mahoraga or any of the buildings that were around them during their fight. Yuji beats Mahito after a long struggle and with the help of multiple people and runs into Yuta, someone with who his aura alone scares Naoya out of even wanting to fight him, and that Yuji can only compare to Gojo, even without Yuta summoning Rika beside him. Yuta chases down Yuji and has so much curse energy that Yuta can one-shot him whenever he wants to, being kicked a single time so hard that all of the air came out of his body, then being put in a chokehold by Rika, who isn't even fully manifested, with Rika being so strong without even using her full strength that Yuji can't even move. Yuji is then killed and revived by Yuta at the same time with reverse curse technique, waking up later, talking to Yuta, realizing he was holding back, and thinking that Yuta at his full strength can kill Sukuna if he had to. This is important because Yuji isn't blindly saying this, at least not in one aspect. While he was surprised when Sukuna swapped back with him in Shibuya, showing that he didn't know what was happening while Sukuna fought Jogo and Mahoraga, the memories did eventually flood into his brain, letting him see how strong Sukuna actually was. The biggest question mark here with this statement is that Yuji has never seen Yuta's full strength. Yuji at this point only knows two things. One, that Yuta has more curse energy than anyone he's ever seen in his life, and two, that Yuta has Rika, who he hasn't seen the full power of yet either. You may be asking yourself at this point, well, if he's only seen a fraction of what Yuta can do and hasn't seen Rika at her full strength, doesn't that mean that Yuta can beat him? Well, no, not exactly. There are a few things to remember when comparing Yuta to Sukuna. Yuta has several curse techniques that he can use, and all of them haven't been shown yet. This can work in Yuta's favor. Yuta also has a domain expansion that hasn't been shown yet at any point in the story. How refined his domain actually is being up for debate since no one has actually seen it. Sukuna's domain expansion being so high level that is compared to a god painting on air is going to be a level that's hard to compete with. Yuta fighting 4 special grade level fighters in one day while making sure he didn't kill 2 of them does put him at a very high level. Although even those same enemies that he fights think of Sukuna in his prime and think that Yuta still has a long way to go. Full power Sukuna is a completely different animal compared to anything in the series so far. Sukuna at his full strength is described as a natural disaster, a calamity, and was so strong that people in his era didn't even think he was human, an idea that Sukuna thinks he transcended as well. Sukuna is even outright stated to be stronger than Rika at his full strength, with no room for interpretation given by the author. When he gets asked about it after an interviewer asks who's stronger, Rika or Sukuna, the author flat out says Sukuna and nothing else, being completely solid in his answer. This is interesting because in Volume 0, the entire Night Parade of 100 Demons was based on the idea that Suguru could wipe out every sorcerer in Japan with 99% odds as long as he controlled Rika's strength, a vengeful spirit that Gojo said he would have to risk his life to beat, which he doesn't say about anyone else in the series. Sukuna being so strong that no one in the Heian era, even when training specifically to beat him, could take him down. His body being so strong that people can't even damage his dead remains in grave wax. This godly level of power likely being why he's spoken about like some deity as the Fallen instead of just another guy. Sukuna often gets compared to Gojo at his full strength, but the difference between how much people feared them in their primes can't be compared. This isn't because of a strength difference, as the story repeatedly hammers that the difference between them isn't that great, if there even is a big difference at all. The way the author explains it is that Sukuna's generation was far more vicious than those that exist today, basically saying that Sukuna and Gojo aren't that far apart, but everyone that Gojo would fight in his era are a bunch of at least compared to the Heian era. Uraume respected Sukuna's full strength so much that he was his minion while he was alive and stayed completely faithful to Sukuna after 1,000 years, even with Uraume being strong enough to take out Choso, Yuji, and many others with a single use of his curse technique. How strong Sukuna is at his full strength hasn't been shown yet, but there is some indication of how strong he should actually be, to give you an idea of what his full strength will look like. To the point where this entire intro about how hyped up his full strength was in his prime was completely necessary. The author talks about special grade curse objects in the fan book, where he says that one finger from Sukuna is equal to the amount of curse energy in a special grade curse spirit. Seeing as eating a finger of Sukuna for a curse spirit turns them into a finger bearer, he should be at least 20 times stronger than a finger bearer at his full strength at a bare minimum. This may sound underwhelming as finger bearers aren't the epitome of strength in the series, but let me tell you why this matters so much. The first thing to understand is how much a 2 times multiplier in Jujutsu Kaisen actually is. Going by this same metric, Sukuna at 10% of his strength was enough to wipe out a finger bearer with no challenge at any point in the fight. Mahito in Shibuya is at a point where he and Yuji are at least in the same general weight class, even though Mahito is stronger. Then when Mahito taps into his new transformation, the instant spirit body of distorted killing, he gets 2 times stronger than he was before. This is enough of a boost for Mahito to completely cancel Yuji out, to the point where his attacks don't even reach him. And his only way of damaging Mahito is to hit him with a black flash imbued with every ounce of curse energy that he has. Mahito being said to have reached something that's on a completely different level than he was on as a cursed spirit entirely. Now with that in mind, take a 20 times multiplier on something that could kill Yuji in the beginning of the series, and something that would have killed Megami without Divine Dog totality, and 20 times stronger than a finger bearer sounds a lot more impressive. Even then, it could be an amount that's greater than that depending on how you interpret the story. Since cursed spirits aren't proper vessels, the grade of the cursed spirit before they eat the finger can vary, there can be incompatibility, blah blah blah. Either way, Sukuna getting an entire special grade cursed spirit worth of an amp every time he gets another finger is extremely significant, and makes it much more clear why he towered over all of his enemies every single time he gained another fraction of his strength. Sukuna at his full power is even compared to Gojo, who Gojo even admits would give him a hard time. Gojo is the same man who, by being born, sent almost every cursed spirit in his generation into hiding, beat Toji as a teenager who to this day would still be one of the strongest human beings alive, and then had 10 more years to train on top of that, to the point where the disaster curses, who would murder the majority of the Jujutsu Kaisen roster, run from him when they see him. Gojo being the only person that's called on for the most dangerous executions, having the power in his hands to wipe out almost anyone that he runs into, the only opponent in question as of this moment being Sukuna himself. With this special grade stacking method given by the author, Sukuna being way stronger than Toji, who Gojo beat as a teenager, also makes way more sense, including how badly he beat Jogo after eating 15 of them. Kashimo being one of the only people who was open about wanting to fight Sukuna at all costs, having heard about his strength for his entire life from Kenjaku. Kenjaku saying that Sukuna, even after 600 years, is the strongest person he's ever seen. Even 400 years later, 1,000 years after Sukuna's death, not changing his opinion, saying that to wipe out everyone, they would need to get rid of Gojo and revive Sukuna. You can take this statement to mean two different things. One, that Sukuna is needed to beat Gojo in case anything goes wrong with sealing him, and two, that even with Gojo out of the way, Sukuna is so strong that Kenjaku and the disaster curses, and the entire army of cursed spirits that Kenjaku can summon on a whim will be nothing compared to Sukuna, who can kill all of them at the same time even if they all fight him at once. This is somewhat echoed by Mahito when he fights Yuji in the Nami, where he says that Sukuna can take out everyone by himself even if none of them are alive when he gets fully revived. Sukuna getting 20 special grades stronger when he gets back all of his strength, especially when he was already compared to Gojo and Yuta at 75%, might just be able to kill Gojo if they both go all out, if not have a very close fight that takes both of them close to death. Sukuna's fighting style is one of the best things that he has. Not only is he stronger than his opponents, he's smarter than them. He was the only person in the series to see right through Megami's plan to counter him from the very beginning, tapped into secrets about cursed spirits and curse techniques that hardly anyone seems to know about, and pushed his domain expansion to godlike levels, even using his mind to figure out how to beat Maharaga, who hasn't been tamed in 1,000 years, on his first try in record time, dancing around Megami their entire fight by frustrating him, taking him out of his usual calm, calculated demeanor, taking Megami down mentally with his words throughout the fight, and physically as well. Sukuna has two different slashing techniques, Dismantle and Cleave. Dismantle is what he uses normally, and Cleave is what he uses for stronger targets, Cleave being adjusted in strength to match the curse energy and strength of his opponent, basically letting him take them down in one hit if the attack hits in the right spot. Sukuna uses Dismantle against several different opponents, most notably Maharaga, who once Maharaga adapted, surprised Sukuna by him deflecting his technique when he used it a second time, Sukuna being in shock that Maharaga could even see his technique in the first place. Sukuna's domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine, takes both of these techniques and pushes them to their limits, making a domain expansion that's described as a god painting on air and a truly divine technique, spreading it to a 200-meter radius and slashing anything in its guaranteed hit range over and over again with Dismantle and Cleave until they die, or at least until he decides that he should stop. Sukuna also has another technique that only he seems to understand, which is the box. When Sukuna opens the box, he gets access to a flame-based technique that's strong enough to vaporize Maharaga in any part of the city that was around it in one hit. This box likely being what he was talking about when he says over and over again that the majority of the roster doesn't understand what curses really are. Sukuna is also one of the most advanced users of reverse curse technique in the series, being one of the 3 people on the Jujutsu Kaisen roster that can heal others with his reverse curse technique, those being Sukuna, Yuta, and Shoko. Sukuna regenerating entire limbs and not even needing to target poisons, because as the king of poisons, he's immune to all of them anyway. Sukuna also has a unique trait in that he gains any knowledge that Yuji does throughout the series, since as a human vessel, Sukuna and Yuji are compatible, which by itself is for deeper reasons. Because of Yuji being his vessel, Sukuna would also be completely aware of the strength of Yuji's opponents. So when he calls Choso inferior and looks down on Mahito, it's not from blind arrogance, he just actually knows he's that much stronger. Sukuna has never shown any use of the Black Flash, although considering how strong he is, it would be odd if he didn't have it. He also hasn't shown any domain counters outside of his own domain overriding someone else's, although again, it would be odd if he didn't have one considering how strong he actually is, on top of the fact that overriding someone else's domain with his own will be enough in 99% of cases, that 1% being unknown circumstances that have yet to be seen. That's all there is today for Sukuna. This was a very interesting video to make, and I actually learned a lot myself when I was writing it. So if you like these kind of things, there will be more of them popping up on the channel, specifically with a variety of series. Dragon Ball characters, Jujutsu Kaisen characters, a couple of Bleach characters, and some Naruto characters as well. If that's your thing, hit the like and subscribe to the channel, and have a great day.